Hello everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you so much for joining me and welcome to another episode of 5 Albums I Can't Live Without. This one, the Heavy Metal Edition. These are all perfect albums, and for me at least, they are my favorite go-to albums. From start to finish, I think they've got the best songs on it. There's not a bad song on these albums, making all of these albums I can't live without. But before we dive into all that, if you are new to my channel and you haven't already hit the subscribe button, please click the button. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things help support my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by subscribing, you'll be able to stay up to date on all that's going on in the world of music, just like this, with 5 albums I can't live without, Heavy Metal Edition. So I will say this, on a side note, I've not included favorite bands like Megadeth and Metallica, as I consider those bands thrash, so there is going to be a separate video for thrash metal bands. That being said, let's jump into this, and in no particular order. First one up, Judas Priest, Painkiller from 1990. It was their 12th studio album at the time. Happened to be my first album that I picked up from the band. This one here, it was actually delayed in its release for 5 months due to the pending trial over subliminal messages in their music. Ultimately though, and thank goodness, the band was acquitted of that and or not found guilty of it. And then they, of course, triumphantly returned with this album, Painkiller. It was the first album to feature new drummer Scott Travis in the lineup, and with his use of the double kick drums throughout this, it really gave the band a much harder edge and a more modern sound to them. But also, keyboardist Don Airey was brought into play on the album, and due to bassist Ian Hill's illness at the time, Don plays most of the bass parts on it. He did it on his Mini Moog. It's also the first album that, since 1978, that was produced by Chris Sangares. So in my opinion, this album here, it's got the best production on it, and it's got the best sound of any of their albums on it. The 3 singles that were released at the time are still regularly played live in concert: Painkiller, Nightcrawler, and A Touch of Evil. But for me, it's the deep cuts. It's the rest of the songs on this album that are just as good, like Help Patrol, Leather Rebel, and Between the Hammer and the Anvil. All really great songs on this, and that combined all together on here is what's making this an album I can't live without. All right, next one up we've got Sabotage, Handful of Rain. From 1994, this one here, 8th studio album from the band and second to feature new vocalist Zach Stevens. But it was also the first to feature new guitarist Alex Skolnick coming in from Testament, who replaced original guitarist Chris Oliva after the tragic death from a car accident. It was announced right from the get-go, though, that this would be the only album Alex would be doing. He'd be stepping in just for the album, and he was doing it to help out the band, but also to honor his friend Chris, which is unfortunate in the sense that this album is so good, one of the best in my opinion. Interesting too, though, the album was recorded as a 3-piece, so you had Zach Stevens on vocals, Alex Skolnick on guitars, and then you had John Oliva, who was the original vocalist of the band. He was still very much involved in controlling the efforts of the group, but he was not actually a band member. And so he handled the bass and drums, keyboards, and guitars on this album. The other members that are credited on the album, Johnny Lee Middleton, as a bassist, hadn't played on an album since 1985, and Steve Wolschultz, who was credited for drums, had already left the band by this point. So of course, those being handled by John Oliva. You know, and despite all of this, and or perhaps maybe because of this, is I think what makes this album amazing. It just features some of their best songs on it, like title track Handful of Rain. You know, the acoustic opening bit on that before it just kicks in with such power on it. The song Chance, which precursor to Trans-Siberian Orchestra's, got them doing the singing of rounds on it, and in just, you know, bombast, over the top performance. Nothing Going On, which has some of the most amazing guitar work on it by Alex. And then Alone You Breathe, which is one of the most powerful and beautiful ballads that they ever did. All just making this album here one that I can't live without. All right, next up we've got Queensryche, Empire from 1990, fourth studio album from the band, and follow-up to the equally good concept album Operation Mindcrime. Now, Empire is a less metal album, much more commercial album than previous efforts, and the band had focused on a more song-oriented approach for this one here, making it much more varied in style throughout and more standout tracks in my opinion. In all, the band had released 6 singles and videos from it: Empire, Best I Can, Silent Lucidity, Jet City Woman, Another Rainy Night, and Anybody Listening. A lot of tracks from a metal band to be released single-wise in promotion of an album. That just really wasn't heard of for a metal band to have 6 singles and videos made from an album. Of course, it would all lead to the album ultimately being certified triple platinum. But, you know, those hits that came off the album would make this worthy in and of itself. But for me, it's the deep cuts that are throughout that just put this album over the top, like The Thin Line, which easily could have been a hit off of this album, and Resistance. Just really, really great songs, you know, deep into this album here. The quality of the album's production on this is outstanding. I think the sequencing is outstanding. Even now with the reissue of this album, the 3 bonus tracks that they've added to it, you've got a song from the Ford Fairlane soundtrack on here. On this, you've got an outtake, you've got a B-side. It just shows the quality of performance that the band was doing at the time and how they were really at the top of their game, making this all an album that I can't live without. All right, next one up, we've got Quiet Riot, Metal Health from 1983, third studio album from the band, first album to be released in the US at least, and considered by most to be their debut album because it was only vocalist Kevin Dubrow that appeared on the first 2 albums, and those albums in and of itself were only released in Japan. The album itself also holds the distinction of being the first heavy metal album to reach the #1 spot on the Billboard 200 album chart, but also they had 2 top 40 hits on this: Come On Feel the Noise, which went all the way to #5, and Metal Health, which went to #31. The album itself would go on to sell 6 million copies, proving that there was a lot of hidden gems still on this album that could have been found. Don't Want to Let You Go, and Slick Black Cadillac on here, which was a re-recording of a song from their second album. Kind of cool that they did that with this new lineup on this album here, but it just goes to show you that if they had promoted this album with even more singles and videos at the time, who knows, you know, what it could have done for the band or how big it could have been for the band. For me, though, this album is just a perfect driving album. It's an album that, you know, when I turned 16 and got my license, I played this album nonstop throughout when I was driving. It was just perfect for that sort of feel and spirit, all making this an album that I can't live without. All right, and the last album to come in as part of the 5 albums I can't live without heavy metal edition, Scorpions, Savage Amusement from 1988, 10th studio album from the band. This one here was the final studio album to be produced by longtime producer Dieter Dierks, and while the album itself was certified platinum in the US, it's not considered one of their overly successful albums or most popular albums, but for me at least, the 9 tracks that are on this album are perfect from start to finish. There were 3 singles released from the album: Rhythm of Love, Believe in Love, and Passion Rules the Game. All great tracks on here, but aside from Rhythm of Love, which is probably one of my favorite all-time Scorpions tracks, the deep cuts on here are where it's at, like Don't Stop at the Top, Media Overkill, and Walking on the Edge, another really, really great song from the band. The thing is, what I'm drawn to on this album here is the consistency of performance throughout. The quality material starts high, it continues high all the way through, it doesn't let up. Even with the last track on here being the mega ballad Believe in Love, it's just perfect the way that it works, the way that it is sequenced, all making this an album that I can't live without. So There you go. That is 5 albums I can't live without, Heavy Metal Edition. Don't forget to check the description for links to related videos, in particular the last episode, which was a Desert Islands Picks version. And if you like this video, please share it out on social media. Help spread the word that way. I would also appreciate that. All right, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this. And if you did, please remember to comment, like, and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts. I hope everyone has a great day, and I'll talk to you all real soon. Bye-bye.